Have you ever wondered why some people seem so fragile when someone touches their belongings? Or why that friend of yours always claims to physically feel others' pain, calling it extraordinary empathy? The answer may lie in the little-known manuscripts of Dr. William James, who in the late 19th century had already identified behavioral patterns that we now know as narcissistic identification. What you'll discover in the next few minutes could be the key to freeing yourself from repetitive cycles in relationships and understanding behaviors that have always seemed incomprehensible. Stay with me until the end, because this information could completely transform your perception of the people around you, and perhaps of yourself. When a child comes into the world, they become for themselves the only real thing. The rest of the universe is only seen from their fanciful point of view, and at this stage, they accept themselves as the only all-powerful center of everything. Dr. William James called this phase primordial narcissism in his notes from 1890, long before modern studies on child development confirmed his observations. This initial narcissism is completely natural. The baby does not distinguish between itself and its mother. When hungry, it cries and has access to the maternal breasts almost as if they were part of its own body. This imagination is further encouraged when allowed to use a pacifier between meals. The process by which the child gradually separates in thought and feeling from the objects around them is relatively slow and, according to Dr. William James's findings, is rarely completely achieved. What happens when this natural process of separation is interrupted or distorted? Dr. William James documented in his private diary dated 1895, found only 70 years later in a Harvard library, 5 distinct manifestations of narcissistic identification that persist in adult life when this development is compromised. The first manifestation appears in how we appreciate stories and tales. Just as children identify with enchanted princes and princesses, narcissistic adults intensely identify with characters from novels and films. We identify with the hero of the book and, in fantasy, perform their wonderful deeds. We thus satisfy our narcissistic desire to be great and powerful. If we lack intelligence and the hero is intelligent, through identification, we achieve the pleasures of feeling superior. If the heroine is beautiful and everyone falls in love with her, we can, indirectly, feel admired. Dr. William James observed that, while this form of escapism is healthy in occasional doses, it becomes problematic when a person can no longer distinguish between fantasy and reality. The second manifestation, and perhaps the most harmful in interpersonal relationships, is excessive identification with other human beings. You certainly know someone who cannot stand to see another person feeling pain, even during necessary procedures such as medical dressings. These people call themselves sympathetic, but according to Dr. William James's lost studies, such behavior is not true altruism. It is an inconvenient failure of an entirely selfish nature. I remember a case documented by Dr. William James about a woman who absolutely refused to remove a speck from a friend's eye. The investigation revealed that narcissism had exaggerated her own feelings, so that a speck in her own eye was unbearable torture. As she completely identified with other people, it would be a real agony for her to try to help her friend. To really help someone, you don't need to feel their feelings and suffer their pains. You need to understand them. The more you dive into others' feelings, the more biased your judgment becomes and the less capable you are of effectively helping. True altruism, as demonstrated by Dr. William James's experiments with volunteers at Harvard, requires adequate emotional distance. The third manifestation of narcissistic identification is even more fascinating. Just as a child identifies with their living environment, they also identify with their inanimate environment. If you take a rattle from a baby, they will cry with as much vigor as if you had caused them severe physical pain. You, in fact, took away part of themselves, of the little omnipotent person they consider themselves to be. Dr. William James extensively documented how this behavior persists in adult life. The narcissistic adult still deeply identifies with their belongings. They will be absurdly disturbed by the breaking of a cup that belongs to them, the theft of a jewel, damage to their clothes or property, no matter how insignificant the object. They cannot perceive that these things are just replaceable objects, because in their unconscious, these items are extensions of themselves. Dr. William James observed this phenomenon in 43 adults during his years of study, establishing a clear connection between excessive attachment to material objects and early emotional traumas. The fourth manifestation reveals itself in how the narcissist relates to their own belongings. The narcissist who considers themselves the best of beings will attribute similar importance to their property. If they own an inferior automobile that constantly presents problems, they will defend it in irrational ways, praising it as the best car on the market. And most surprisingly, they will actually believe it. The same happens with their house, their books, their relatives, with everything that is even remotely connected to them. They will speak well of them all and will be eager to display them and defend their virtues regardless of objective reality. Dr. William James described this as narcissistic perceptual distortion, a mental filter that alters the perception of reality to protect the idealized self-image. Finally, the fifth and perhaps most impactful manifestation, the choice of the love object. Dr. William James observed that, just as the mythical Narcissus himself fell in love with his reflection, the modern narcissist seeks to love reflections of himself. In the most extreme form, the individual remains entirely selfish and incapable of loving anyone beyond himself. Through identification, however, he can love those attributes of his own personality that he sees in other people. He may love someone for a facial resemblance, for a voice similar to his own, for tastes similar to his own, but most commonly for a body similar to his own. And this is where Dr. William James made his most controversial discovery. He may fall in love with someone of his own sex, resulting in what we now call homosexuality. It is important to understand that Dr. William James did not consider this a pathology, but a natural consequence of a certain psychological development. He observed that partially repressed homosexuality causes some people, especially women in his time, to kiss each other, call each other affectionate names, delight in holding each other's hands, actions that, between people of the opposite sex, would immediately be interpreted as indicative of romantic affection. Are you beginning to see the pattern? Narcissism is not just vanity or self-centeredness. It is a deep pattern of relationship with the world that affects every aspect of life. The recognition method that Dr. William James developed allows identifying these patterns in minutes before they cause irreparable damage to your relationships. It is important to highlight that we all possess some degree of narcissism, what Dr. William James called healthy narcissism. A certain dose of self-love is essential for survival. It is excessive narcissism, excessive identification, excessive sympathy, excessive impatience, excessive anger, excessive crying that are truly harmful and lead to profound unhappiness. Dr. William James's observations reveal that this excessive narcissism disproportionately affects women, not by biological nature, but by social conditioning. From their earliest years, the environment impresses them with the idea that girls are made of sugar, spice, and everything nice, while boys are treated with less delicacy. Their narcissism is encouraged, and their capacities to face facts and reality are discouraged from the beginning. This discovery by Dr. William James, made over 120 years ago, anticipated modern discussions on gender conditioning by decades, and most impressively, his methods of recognition and intervention continue to be validated by contemporary neuroscience studies. Dr. William James's protocols for recognizing and overcoming narcissistic patterns in your own life are surprisingly simple and can be applied in just 7 minutes daily. Recent studies from Stanford University have confirmed that this daily practice can reduce narcissistic behaviors by up to 74% in just 21 days. Imagine what your life would be like if you could instantly recognize these patterns in yourself and others. How would your relationships change if you could distinguish between genuine empathy and narcissistic identification? How would your decisions be different if you weren't unconsciously projecting your own narcissism onto the world? Dr. William James's pioneering work shows us that narcissism is not a perpetual sentence. It is a learned pattern that can be unlearned with the proper tools. The release of these patterns can transform not just your relationships, but your entire life experience. If this content resonated with you in any way, Leave your comment sharing which of the 5 manifestations of narcissism you have already observed in your own life. Subscribe to the channel to receive our next video, where I will reveal Dr. William James's exact protocol for neutralizing each of these narcissistic patterns. Remember, knowing the patterns is the first step to transforming them. Until the next video.